Um, in this little part, I'm going to talk about the helmet of redemption. And we're going to look at two different aspects of it. One is how to protect yourself from yourself. And the second one is how to help others to put on the helmet. And the key verse is James 4, verse 7. I'm going to read this from the ESV. It says, "Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." Resist. The word resist in Greek is pronounced antistemi, and we get our word antithemi, sorry. And we get our word antithesis from it. So it means to set oneself against, oppose, or refuse to yield. You resist the evil one to the place where he will flee from you. And so my question to you today is, do you want to join the resistance? You know, we were talking earlier about how when there's a situation, you just go through the different pieces of the armor and say, which piece do I need to put on? And so with the helmet, the question is, what kind of stress are you under? Because Belial is the principality. He's the worthless one. He causes worthlessness, and he causes perversity of all kinds, bondages, addictions, depression, and all kinds of things that are have to do with bondage and stress. And so remember, I was telling you about the turban in Israel and how they would wrap their heads around with this scarf. And that's how the Roman helmets were too. They had different plumes on them, like a different thing that came out of the top. And sometimes they were different colors, like red or purple. And they identified whether the man was a tribune or he was a sergeant or he was a centurion, that kind of thing. And so when we have on the helmet, it identifies us. And so that's an important thing to remember about the helmet. And now look at 2 Corinthians 1 and verse 10. Because when we say redemption, we've been redeemed, you know, like I said, I've been redeemed, you know, by the blood of the Lamb. So we get, in our culture, we get the idea that it's just a past tense thing, like you have been redeemed. But in the Eastern way of thinking, when you say redemption or I've been redeemed, it actually has a past, a present, and a future meaning to it. And that is in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10, who delivered us from so great a death. So we have been redeemed, and does deliver. That's, we are being redeemed right now. It's present tense. In whom we trust that he will yet deliver us. He will yet redeem us. So whenever you're talking about redemption, you have to put it in all three of those tenses, like past, present, and future. God has delivered us. In other words, when we received his spirit, we got delivered. It's done. It's over. But we also need that kind of redemption or deliverance every day, all the day. So he is always redeeming us. And then, of course, when we get our new bodies and get to be with the Lord forever, there's a future redemption too that we haven't seen yet. So the helmet, as far as the piece of armor goes, it has a lot to do with the present tense delivering, not so much about the past. I mean, all it has some to do with the past too. But when you put and you set it on your head and you wrap it around your head, it's a present thing that you're doing. And so it's not enough to know that we are rescued in the past. We need rescuing and redeeming every day. And when you study the word redemption, it always is from something to something. So we are redeemed from death and then to life, right? And we're redeemed from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light, from being strangers and foreigners to being sons with an inheritance. So we're always looking for what it is that what we are to, what we are delivered to. Um, and those are the things when, especially like in a counseling situation too, where you see someone's in bondage, is like it's important to identify what the bondage is and what's causing it. But the most important part is to help them get through that to get to the freedom or to being set free and walking in that freedom. So the word Belial, let's see. Let me see here. Okay, I'm just gonna get my notes. Okay. The principality Belial, like I said, it's he's the one who's he causes worthlessness, and every kind of bondage or depression or stress. And his name Belial can actually, it comes from a word that means to swallow. And so you could also call his name the swallower, because it takes people and prevents them from getting out of whatever they're into, whether it's drugs or it could be even as simple as just having an addiction to TB or something, where they're stuck in a chair and can't move. There's all different kinds of bondages. But depression is a good example of the swallowing and wearing out. And, there may be even a reason for it. Like, for example, if someone lost their job after 30 years and, their whole identification as a man, for example, was in their career, and then all of a sudden they don't have it anymore. And if that kind of disappointment is allowed to fester or grow, then, depression sets in. And if you think about it, people are always talking about being stressed out, right? And so the answer to it is this helmet. And so I want to tell you about how redemption has a 5-step program. and and this description of this is in another book that I wrote called Defense of Salvation, where it goes through all the different Hebrew and Aramaic words and explains what these steps are. But I'm not going to tell you about the words today. I'm just going to tell you the steps. So the first step is we are bought with a price. And that means that, like, when, at one time we were like slaves on an auction block, and Christ paid the price so that we could get set free. And we were in bondage to sin, but there was a price that needed to be paid in order for us to get set free. So Galatians 4 is just such a beautiful section here. And I'm going to read this from my translation again, starting in verse 3. So also, while we were babies, we were made subject to the elements of the world. But when the fulfillment of the time came, God sent his son, and he was from a woman and was under the law, so that he would redeem, buy with a price, those who were under the law, and that we would receive adoption. So remember, I said it's from something to something. So from being a slave to being a son. We were adopted as sons of God. And now that you are sons, God has sent into your hearts the Spirit of his Son that calls, Father, our Father. From now on, you are not servants, but sons. And if sons, you are also heirs of God by way of Jesus Christ. So a lot of the thing with redemption is that it seems like the price is very high, but what the from is high, but the to part is even higher. It's like you were made and you were adopted as a son, but not only a son, just a complete heir of God and joint heirs with Christ, to where we get his full inheritance. It's not we didn't possibly deserve anything like that. We were slaves on an auction block and ready to get killed. And God took us out and paid the price for us to not only be sons and to be adopted as sons, but to be able to call God our Father. And there, just a note about the word Abba in Aramaic is it has a lot of respect and honor and awe involved with the name Abba. It's not really the term daddy. I mean, I know people have taught that a lot, but and it does have to do with intimacy in some respects, but it really has more to do with honor, of like the father of the family was the one who you looked up to and listened to and obeyed and went to with every single problem. It, an Abba what commanded the deepest loyalty and respect that you could have. And so when you say that we have the privilege of saying Father, our Father, and we're saying it together too, we're saying our Father. It's not just my father, it's not my daddy only, it's our Father, our Abba, who did this. He sent his son to pay the price, and so that he could buy us back and be able to give us the full inheritance of Jesus Christ. That's only step one. Step two is that a price needed to be paid by a kinsman redeemer. If you remember the story of Ruth, Naomi had lost her husband, and then her two daughters had also lost their husbands, and so they come back to Israel and they have no inheritance and they're bankrupt and they have nothing. And then Boaz is the one who's related to Naomi, and he's willing to pay the price to redeem the land, but at the same time he redeems Ruth from being a widow and makes her his wife. And so there's three aspects. He has to be related, he had to be willing, and he had to qualify to pay the price. So Jesus qualifies to pay the price because he was the lamb that was without spot and blemish. And he was willing to lay down his life, and he was a kinsman to Israel. That's how come he can be the Redeemer. So that's number two. And then number three is we need to be snatched and rescued. We have really been rescued from the authority of darkness, but I picture this like we're on a train that's speeding down the track, but it's going straight off a cliff. And just before the train goes over the edge, we get snatched out off of the train and rescued from sure death and destruction that, you know, would have happened had we gone over the edge, right? So that's what it's talking about in Colossians 1, verse 12. It says, you should give thanks to God the Father, who has made us worthy for a portion of the inheritance of the holy ones in light. Well, we are thankful that we have this inheritance, but he has delivered us. He snatched us out from the authority of darkness and has transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. So when we're snatched out, right, you're delivered, but then you're not just hanging in midair for the rest of your life. He's transferred us to the kingdom of his son. So from being on a train that was going to sure death to getting transferred into the kingdom of Jesus and his beloved son. So number 4 is then we're brought in to have a relationship with God as a son. Um, the slave is made a son, never to go back to the bondage, but he's also given a new home and a new family. And that's, if we read it in Romans 8, verse 15, it says, for you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, by which we call Father, our Father. There's the Abba, our Father again. And the Spirit gives testimony to our spirit that we are the sons of God. God's desire is not only that we get rescued from death, but that we have a relationship with him as a son on an ongoing basis. So now you can see the redeeming part, like the present tense things. And if we are sons, then we're also heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs of Jesus Christ, that if we suffer with him, we will also be glorified with him. We have this redemption because of forgiveness of sins, and that's why we can be, I call it, we have boldness. We have speaking access to God. We have been ushered into the Holy of Holies, into the throne room, where we can talk to him any time of the day or night and know that he's listening and know that he cares about every single thing that's going on. So when we need redeeming from stressful situations, no matter what it is, this is the 4th step. You've got to go and talk to him about it and ask him, what do I do? Tell me your perspective. Help me to understand what's going on and where's that coming from, different things like that. And like, there's a verse that talks about how David set the Lord always before his face. And that's the same thing as the idea of wrapping the turban around your mind. It's like you set the Lord always before your face so that when you look over here, you don't see the problem. You see Christ. You look this way, you don't see the problem. You see Christ. And you set the Lord God by way of Jesus, by way of the Spirit, always before your face. And that's what controls your mind. That's what gives it redemption on an ongoing basis. So then step 5 is basically to walk into that life of freedom, to be released and set free. In all the different things, like there's so many different kinds of bondages, but in every single one of them, the point is to get set free from it. And here's just some things that it is not when you're talking about helping other people to get set free too. What it is not is, number 1, you don't pat somebody on the back and just say, it's okay, this will pass. Number 2, you can't carry the burden for them. Each person has their own shield and they have their own helmet. And I know that passage in Galatians 6 talks about how we should bear one another's burdens. But what that verse means is that we are to carry the weight of a burden at times where someone can't carry it themselves. But the 2 verses later says each person has to carry their own load. So each person has to put on their own helmet. And yet there are times where I can step in and go, okay, let me carry a weight of this burden for you for a little while. But we can't bear everybody else's burdens. And Um, but you know, when something gets too heavy, then there are times where we can come in, just like there's times in when we can come in with our shield to be a buffer. But still, that person needs to pick up their own shield again and start using the name of Jesus Christ themselves. And then the third thing it's not is to just tell somebody to renew your mind. Because if they could do it already by themselves, then they already would be set free. But they need help to do it because the way it's described in Ephesians is, or it's from First Thessalonians, is that the helmet is the hope of redemption. And what a person needs is not to be told to renew their mind. They need to be told that they can have hope of being redeemed on an ongoing basis. Because if someone's in addiction, for example, sometimes it takes a serious period of time to come out of it completely. So it's not just like, boop, okay, now I'm set free. You know, when there's a really intensely ingrained pattern in someone's life, it takes a while to break it. But when you give them hope, then they will be able to grasp onto it. So hope is a really big key. There's a part of the hope that is future too. I call them sometimes mini hopes. It's like somebody needs to be told that they have the possibility of redemption right now. Not when you die, not, you know, sometime in the future. Like, oh, yeah, eventually we're going to get our new bodies. Yes, but we're dealing with our body we have right now. So we need to have hope right now. And remember the verse in Hebrews 6:19, where it says that hope is the anchor of our soul. Well, let me read you the Aramaic version. It says that hope is for us as an anchor that holds our soul so that it is not shaken. And the word shaken, a related word is, we get the word earthquake from it. Like, so many stressful situations are like, they shake you like this, you know, and you don't know how to get out of it. But when you have hope, then it provides an anchor to our soul. It holds our soul, our mind, our deepest feelings, so that it doesn't swerve. It might go like this a little bit. Go, yeah, that was not a fun experience here, but it won't let us have to just like fly off the handle. If we do these 5 steps, and they're not necessarily only in order where you have to do them in order, but they're a 5-step program, just like just like when you go in AA or something like that, you sometimes go back and do the first step over again. So we're bought with a price. It needed to be paid by a kinsman redeemer, and we get our inheritance back. And number 3, we need to be snatched off the train and rescued. And then number 4, we're brought into a relationship with God as sons, so we can approach our Father about anything and everything in our lives. And number 5, we are released to live a life of freedom. So that's what I wanted to share about the helmet. We set it on our head and wrap it around and just keep looking at, everywhere you look, you see hope. The hope that you will get set free of any kind of bondage that there is. God bless you.